What's up guys, Trevor Hunter here at Dirt Bike Test. Today we're going over our long-term 2020 YZ250F project bike. We've got well over 160, 170 hours on this thing right now. Really not that much work done to it. Kind of to start off, right around the 80-hour mark, we did a full kind of motor rebuild with this bike. GYTR gave us their performance head, which includes the head, the cams, the valves, kind of everything, the whole kind of top end up. So it's all just one kit that bolts right on, super easy. Got really good power out of it, from bottom to mid to top. Kind of just overall, it's better power everywhere. And so whether you're a racer or you're kind of an older guy that just wants that much more torque and luggability out of this bike, or you want to rev the bike more, it kind of does it all. So it was one of the mods we were really happy with, and we're pretty pleased with how it's gone so far. And when we put that GYTR head on, we also did a full kind of motor rebuild as well. It had about 80 hours on the bike, so we did a ProX piston kit and a ProX rod. Kind of replaced the stock rod, put a ProX rod on there. We kind of lost the rod, which was more of a kind of just how hard the bike had been ridden up to that point. We did a few desert races where the bike was like on the rev limiter for quite a while, and it had 80 hours on it, which is quite a bit of time on a 250F, but more so the quality of the hours that were put on this bike rather than the quantity. So we replaced that with the ProX rod, and along with the ProX piston and top end kit, and then that GYTR head all at one time. Going into the durability of all that entire kit, overall it's lasted really, really well. We pulled the top end apart at around 60 hours, and that includes racing through the 24 hours of Glen Helen. So that's 24 straight continuous hours. The motor never cools down. Oil didn't get changed. It's pretty abusive on the motor. And yeah, that's part of that 60 hours that we put on this bike, and everything checked out really well. Starting from top to bottom, the cams look good. They got a little hot, and we'll kind of dive into this more as we reach the piston, the top end. But you can see there's a little bit of heat marks up on the cams, and so we'll get into that later. But also moving down, valves are all on spec. Everything checked out really well. The bike was never hard to start, at least more so than a regular YZ250F would be. So yeah, the valves are in spec. Everything looked good there. Piston and cylinder overall looked pretty good. Could have gone more for sure. The ring was well in spec as well. Could have gone longer if we needed to or wanted to. So yeah, overall that all checked out well. Now maybe the only kind of signs of concern we had, and this doesn't really fall on ProX or the parts we used, but just maybe kind of the what happened during the life of the bike or the motor, is at some point, and likely during that 24 hours of Glen Helen, is the bike started to run a little bit hot. So the piston pin shows some signs of heat and wear, and it kind of wore not entirely perfect, and that kind of translates to the small end of the rod, where it's a little uneven wearing, kind of to match that piston pin. It wasn't enough that we felt the need to replace the rod or anything like that. Still has plenty of life left in it, but it does tell us that, hey, maybe on the next rebuild in another 40, 50 hours or so, that we may want to replace the rod. Just kind of, it's not wearing perfectly straight or even at the time. Like I said, because it did get hot at some point. So as you can see on these, the piston pin right here, you can see the heat marks and everything, and it has a little oblong in the small end of the rod. But once we put the new ProX piston pin in, it felt pretty sturdy and doesn't show any signs of concern as far as we're concerned. So overall, that whole top end and everything, the motor, all looks really good for 60 hours on it. We plan to go to at least 100 hours before it really gets touched again. And even then, even if we do tear it down then, we'd be surprised if it really, really needed it. Overall, everything else is holding up and working really well. Kind of, like suspension, the linkage bearings, the suspension bearings, all that, all are pretty good. The top shock bearing on this bike is pretty worn out, and that's one thing we do need to replace. And we're sitting at 140 hours or so. So that top shock bearing is getting loose. There's a little bit of play in that top shock mount, So that's one thing that we'll need to replace. But overall, everything else does look pretty good. We've gone through 1 or 2 sets of front wheel bearings, and kind of just as after some mud races as well. So that kind of explains that. But steering stem bearings are all check out pretty good. The linkage bearings, that's all good. We're still running the stock exhaust. We've tried some aftermarket exhausts at different times, and not particularly on this bike, but on just other YZ250FXs, and stock exhaust is tough to beat. I mean, it works really, really well, especially for the power we're looking for. Kind of some of the other exhausts that we've tried, and it could have been the mapping. It wasn't our personal bikes. We just hopped on for a moment, but kind of lost that bottom end and that kind of luggability and torque that we really, really love on this YZ250FX. And so we've kind of stuck with the stock exhaust, and we're not complaining. I mean, it works really well. One complaint we would have with it is there's no spark arrestor. So to be kind of off-road friendly, if you want trail riding or off-road racing in some cases, you might need a spark arrestor. That's the only thing that the stock exhaust lacks. But overall, the performance of it itself, it works really, really well. Overall, this bike has held up really well. We've had no timing change issues because we replaced that kind of when we did the top end, so at 80 hours. And then again at the 60-hour mark, or kind of the 140-hour mark, total mark on this bike. But we've had no timing chain failures or anything like that. We've gone through like 2 clutches, I think. I think the basket's starting to show some pretty good wear on it. You could use an aftermarket basket, but even then, just replacing the clutch plates has gotten us pretty good, and the clutch works well. So no complaints there. Really, the only maintenance we've really done is just keeping the air filter clean and change the oil every 4 to 6 hours for the most part. Like I said, that 24-hour race, we went the whole race without changing oil, but other than that, we're pretty religious on 4 to 6 hours changing the oil. Oil filter every other oil change, so nothing too crazy there. It's pretty standard, and overall it's kept this bike running really well for the amount of time it has on it. The rest of the bike is looking good. Chassis component, like the foot pegs, is still pretty tight. Kind of none of the bolts are stripped, or kind of we're not seeing any kind of flaws in Yamaha's manufacturing and durability and design, which is what we've come to expect with the Yamahas. Pretty much everything they have is built to last, and this bike proves it. You know, everything looks good, everything works as good as new, or almost as good as new. Kind of if we want to go sell this right now, there's no stop signs that blur out, you know, this bike has 160 hours on it. You really wouldn't be able to tell unless you're looking at the hour meter on the GYTR app. But yeah, overall, bike has held up really well. Performance, one of the best. I mean, it's such a good all-around bike, whether we're racing desert, racing Grand Prix, riding the motocross track, riding in the mountains. This bike is so capable and so versatile, especially compared to a lot of other 250S. You know, the torque this bike has is really what separates it from a lot of the other bikes, and what makes it so versatile for not only different terrains, but different riders and riding styles. So you can get a fast pro ride this thing fast. You can get an older vet guy, a young kid, anyone could jump on this bike and seemingly feel at home, feel comfortable with the power, ride it fast, and really not have to do many modifications with it. The GYTR head was a plus, and it's something we feel is a benefit from running that. But it's also, if you're not going to run that, the bike isn't not capable, not competitive. Still works really well and can run with just about any other 250F out there. So if you have any questions about this bike or any other testing or products, hit me up at Trevor Hunter 224 on Instagram, or Trevor@dirtbiketest.com. Be happy to answer any questions or concerns you may have. And check out dirtbiketest.com and stay tuned in to all our channels for updates on these and just our new bike testing and product testing and durability updates. We're doing it all, and we're making a big push right now. So share with your friends, stay tuned, and we'll see you out on the trail.
If you liked what you saw in this video, come check us out over at dirtbiketest.com on the webs. We have bike tests, product tests, a lot of fresh dirt, and you can even support us by clicking through our links. Hopefully we'll see you out in the trail.